All right, a few of you have asked about the costs related to Elastic Beanstalk, and we're going to look into that a little bit right now, including some tips for how to maybe save some money with Elastic Beanstalk, even some of your credits right now, and long term, some money with Elastic Beanstalk. So, the first thing I'm going to do is create an application, just like you have before. I'm going to call this test. We're going to make it .NET Core on Linux, and I'm just going to use the sample application. So, first thing, we're just going to let this set up for a minute and go through its setup process. All right, now that our application is totally deployed, you may have noticed as it was going through its deployment, it was starting up a bunch of different services, security groups and auto scaling groups and an Elastic load balancer and maybe some other things, CloudWatch alarms and things like that. And those are all required to provide the services that Elastic Beanstalk provides in the default configuration that is selected when you start it up. But fortunately, you don't have to use the default configuration. So first, I want to look through some of the things that Elastic Beanstalk started up for us. And then we're going to go ahead and change the settings to something that's a little bit cheaper and see how that works. So first of all, let's head on over to EC2 here and look at our instances. By default, we've started up in this tiny little instance, this T2 micro. Still in the process of getting everything up and running. And, you know, it's your standard instance, does some stuff. And if you want to, you can click on the details there, look at the instance ID and see some of the details. We've got a security group that's pretty standard. One of the tricky things and the kind of the more expensive thing that is started up here is this load balancer. And the load balancer is awesome. It does a lot of work for you if you need it. But that work is, as with all things, AWS is not free. So I pulled up here the load balancing costs, and the application load balancer costs about 2 cents per hour that it's running, which, you know, adds up over the course of a day or two or three or four or five while these things are up and running. And again, you only need the load balancer if you're using that auto scaling group. So if your application is getting bigger and smaller based on demand, which is an awesome capability, and it's a great thing that Elastic Beanstalk is able to set up for us. But if you're not using it, then you don't really need that. And you don't need to be paying that extra money to have the load balancer in front. If you've only got one instance running, you don't need all that. So what we're going to do here inside of our instance configuration that you can see is go inside of the actual configuration and look at the options. And here we've got a bunch of things that you can click edit and click through and maybe see what all these different things are. But the important one here is capacity. Capacity is that ability to expand and contract your services depending on how much use you have. And again, the default here is to use this load balanced capacity, which allows it to have small instances, one instance up to 4 instances, depending on the load your application is facing. If you're building something small, if you're just testing something out, you don't need all that. So maybe you could save some money by not. And so what I did is select single instance from the dropdown instead of load balance. And what that's going to do is reconfigure Elastic Beanstalk and reconfigure the entire Elastic Beanstalk environment to no longer use that load balancer. So that's saving you 2 cents an hour, which again, 2 cents an hour isn't a lot, but you know, it does add up over the course of the day or several days while we do things. So if we look, I'm going to go back to load balanced here just really quickly so that we can look at what the options are that are down below. You'll notice we've got options to use availability zones, and we can place things in very specific availability zones if we want to, and do all of these very specific things and scale based on time and all this stuff. But in the end, we're just going to go ahead and go to a single instance for this application because it's a test application. We're just trying stuff out, and I'm going to hit apply. And it's going to say, hey, warning, 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 big error message. Maybe you don't want to do this because it's going to replace all of your current instances and reduce your capacity, which in our case we want to do, but maybe you don't want to do that. So it provides that extra step there. So we confirm, and then this is going to take a little bit But you can see up at the top of the page here, it says Elastic Beanstalk is updating the environment. It's doing these things. It's setting things up. So let's pause again while we wait for Elastic Beanstalk to get set up. All right, that's done. So we've got our little green OK check mark. Everything worked. And if you may have noticed as that was happening, if you did this yourself, down below we've got a bunch of events. I'm going to go ahead and open up all the events so that we can see right here is where the environment update started, updated the configuration, created an Elastic IP. So rather than having a load balancer that's constantly running that has its own IP address, because that's where your users are going to connect, we want to have a constant IP address that we can reassign between machines. If we update code and a new machine is developed or created, a new instance is created. So it's created an Elastic IP for you, and it's updated the DNS record to point to that Elastic IP address, deleted some alarms because those CloudWatch alarms are used to do the auto scaling, deleted the security group for the load balancing server, and successfully deployed. And now we've got it up and running, and now it's going to cost significantly less to run this application. And so now the Elastic Beanstalk environment has been updated to just use a single instance using this IP address based on that name. And if we just highlight that and go to there, you can see our application is still running. So that's a way that you can save some costs. Maybe if you're early in the development process, don't need the reliability and the scalability and all the fancy bells and whistles that having a load balancer and auto scaling provide. You can just go ahead and get rid of all those and go down to a single server to save some money.